Erik the Red is remembered as Greenland's founder, although no contemporary record confirms the famous details of his persuasion. Later Icelandic texts describe an outlaw who explored western fjords, named the country, and returned seeking settlers. Archaeology reveals what happened after such a voyage became a colony. Farms, byres, churches, bones, and imported goods show that settlement required far more than one leader's ambition. The central question is why colonization worked at all on Greenland's narrow southwestern margins. Competing answers emphasize Erik's recruitment, favorable medieval climate, North Atlantic trade, and adaptable household labor. No single factor explains two Norse settlement regions surviving for roughly 5 centuries. Erik's surname refers to red hair or beard within later tradition, not a political title. The main biographies come from the Saga of Erik the Red and the Saga of the Greenlanders. Both were written long after the late 10th century colonization they recount. Landnámabók, the Icelandic Book of Settlements, supplies another retrospective framework for his family and exile. These sources agree on broad movement while differing in particulars. Erik's father, Thorvald Asvaldsson, is said to have left Norway after killings and settled in Iceland. Erik later established a household in western Iceland and became involved in violent disputes. According to the tradition, an assembly sentenced him to 3 years of exile. Such outlawry fits Icelandic legal culture, but the exact chain of confrontations cannot be independently confirmed. The sentence pushed Erik toward land, reportedly sighted west of Iceland by earlier sailors. He was not sailing into a blank map, even within the Saga account. Around 982, he explored Greenland's southwestern coast and fjord systems during his exile. Sheltered inner fjords offered grass, freshwater, nesting birds, fish, seals, and access to upland hunting. Sea ice, storms, and long winters nevertheless made every landing a calculation. Later texts claim Erik spent 3 summers examining viable districts before returning to Iceland. They also say he called the country Greenland because an attractive name would encourage migration. That memorable explanation may preserve practical recruitment or literary wit, but no contemporary advertisement survives. Settlement demanded families, livestock, tools, seed, timber, iron, boats, and commitments extending beyond one season. The sagas report that 25 ships departed Iceland around 985 or 986. Only 14 supposedly reached Greenland, while others turned back or were lost. Those numbers come from later writing and should not be treated as a passenger manifest. Their underlying message is credible. North Atlantic migration exposed entire households to severe maritime risk. Animals needed water and fodder aboard crowded cargo vessels. People carried legal status, skills, dependencies, and existing inequalities into the new settlements. Some settlers may have been enslaved, although the sources do not provide a reliable social census. Their arrival did not create one compact urban settlement. Farms spread along separated fjords where usable pasture and landing places were available. The largest concentration became known as the Eastern Settlement, despite lying in Greenland's southwest. Farther northwest, another cluster formed the Western Settlement near present-day Nuuk. Erik's own estate, Brattahlid, is generally identified near modern Qasiarsuk in Tunuliarfik Fjord. Excavated buildings there reveal repeated construction and later medieval occupation. Attributing every structure to Erik's lifetime would exceed what the remains can establish. The farm's location nevertheless shows why this inner fjord attracted powerful settlers. Summer pastures supported cattle, sheep, and goats brought from Iceland. Stone and turf walls conserved scarce timber while sheltering people and animals. Winter fodder had to be cut, dried, stored, and protected before cold closed the fields. Livestock converted grass into milk, meat, hides, bone, and status. Cattle required heavy labor and substantial hay, making them especially costly symbols of elite farming. Sheep and goats tolerated marginal grazing more readily, though overuse could damage vegetation. Archaeobotanical evidence indicates cultivated fields and imported farming traditions adapted to local conditions. Norse households combined pastoral agriculture with hunting and fishing rather than depending on crops alone. Seal bones become prominent at many sites, reflecting seasonal exploitation of marine resources. Caribou, birds, fish, and gathered materials broadened the food supply across different districts. Dietary isotope studies suggest marine foods grew increasingly important during later centuries. Those results describe long-term adaptation, not a sudden universal menu change. Daily survival joined specialized knowledge of fjord ice, animal movement, weather, and storage. The settlement system also reached far beyond farm boundaries. Hunters traveled north to regions the Norse called Nordsetur for walrus and other Arctic resources. Walrus tusks became Greenland's most important export to European markets. The animals also provided hide for strong rope and other usable materials. Ivory moved through several merchants and ports before reaching elite consumers and church workshops. In return, Greenlanders needed iron, timber, grain, cloth, and prestigious goods from abroad. Trade linked distant farms to Iceland, Norway, and wider European demand. It also made the colony vulnerable when shipping patterns or ivory markets changed. Erik's leadership probably mattered most during initial land allocation and alliance building. Later texts place him at Brattahlid as a leading farmer rather than king of Greenland. Authority rested on land, followers, hospitality, legal influence, ships, and control of valuable contacts. No evidence supports a centralized Greenlandic state commanded by Erik. Assemblies and household networks handled disputes across a dispersed population. His family became prominent in later exploration narratives, especially through Leif Erikson. That neighboring story should not obscure the collective work that sustained Greenland itself. Women managed dairying, textiles, food processing, household stores, and property responsibilities within unequal social structures. Men and women both carried essential knowledge between farms, while seasonal hunting removed labor from home. Children grew into a community whose inherited landscape was Greenland rather than Iceland. The settlement's success therefore became generational before the sagas were composed. Christian conversion introduced another transformation around the year 1000. The Saga of Erik the Red portrays Erik as resistant while his wife, Thiodhild, accepted Christianity. It credits her with a small church near Brattahlid, but details belong to later family tradition. Archaeology has uncovered early Christian burials and church remains in the Kasiarsuk area. These finds establish conversion and worship without proving every domestic episode in the saga. Greenland eventually gained a bishop's seat at Gardar near modern Igaliku. The episcopal complex, large farms, and stone churches reveal deep participation in medieval Christian institutions. This was no isolated camp waiting constantly for rescue. It was a stratified society with wealthy estates, smaller farms, clergy, workers, and people of dependent status. Its endurance challenges explanations based only on an unusually warm climate. Climate reconstructions indicate relatively favorable conditions during parts of early settlement, alongside considerable regional variability. Warmer summers could improve hay production and access, but they did not remove storms or winter scarcity. Norse choices determined how environmental opportunities were converted into food and security. Those choices also carried costs, including grazing pressure and dependence on vulnerable exports. The Western settlement disappeared during the 14th century, while the Eastern settlement lasted longer. Cooling conditions, reduced shipping, economic change, and social rigidity have all been proposed as contributors. That later disappearance should not be projected backward as evidence that Erik's project was doomed. A society lasting centuries represents sustained adaptation, even if it ultimately contracted. Erik's own death is reported only through Saga tradition, which associates it with illness after Leif's return. Precise year and circumstances of Erik's death remain uncertain. His strongest historical footprint is therefore spatial rather than personal. Settlements occupied fjords that his generation helped open to migration, then developed far beyond his control. Future discoveries could sharpen the founder's biography, but the most valuable evidence would be securely dated material from the colony's first households. Such contexts might reveal the timing, scale, and origins of initial settlement without inventing Erik's motives. Until then, later texts supply the expedition's human name while archaeology measures its collective achievement. Greenland was not sustained by clever branding alone. It endured through stored hay, marine hunting, imported iron, family labor, Christian institutions, and risky ocean exchange. Erik the Red helped begin that system, but generations of Greenlanders made the settlement historical.